everyone. In this video, we're going to look at how to use Excel to create a frequency table from numerical data. This is also the same procedure that you can use to create a histogram. So for an example, I pulled a data set from the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment that I can link in the description. This shows immunization data at various schools and child care centers all throughout Colorado. So this is a very large data set, and it's looking at a number of different vaccines. I went ahead and narrowed it down a little bit with a filter, so I'm looking only at their most recent year, which right now is 2024, 2025. And then I chose to look at the specific vaccine, the MMR vaccine. And then for each school, they have the percentage that either has no record, is fully immunized, or is incomplete. I believe those are the options. Oh, no, there's a bunch of options. I chose just the fully immunized. So there's a lot of data that you could look at here, but I kind of narrowed it down so we had sort of one record from each school. I copied and pasted this into a new tab. You'll see that just narrowing that down brought us down to just about 5,000 records from 600,000. So this will be a little bit more manageable. So this is the data set I'm going to be working with. I have an object ID, which is really just a number in the database, the ID for the school, the name of the school, the district it's in, the facility type, what county. The year is the same for all of these, so this is not really a relevant variable. What type of survey it was, it looks like kindergarten versus school. And then the vaccines are all MMR vaccines. The metrics are all just this fully immunized category. And then we have the percent of the students who were fully immunized with the MMR vaccine, and then also the enrollment of the school. So most of these variables or data values are categorical, so we won't be looking at any of those here. I'm actually just going to start with the enrollment numbers. So looking at all of these different schools, analyzing how many students are enrolled. I will also look at the percentage immunized. This is maybe a more relevant statistic to the source of the data, but I think enrollment is still an interesting one to look at. So I want to group all of these enrollment numbers. I can't create a graph for every possible enrollment number because that would be totally unreadable. There are over 4,000 different enrollments here. So I need to figure out what range of data values I'm looking at. So if I don't already have particular classes or bins in mind, I'm going to calculate the min, or the smallest value. So I'm using the Excel function equals MIN, and then parentheses, and then I'm just going to highlight column L, which is my enrollment. So whatever data set you're looking at, you can use this min function to find out what is the smallest enrollment. Looks like the smallest enrollment is 0. I might actually want to exclude the 0 enrollments. It seems like those schools don't have any students at the moment, but I'll go ahead and leave it for now. And then I also want to know how high do these enrollments go. So I'm going to use the max function equals max, parentheses, and then I highlight my data. So we see we have a very wide range of enrollments from 0 all the way up past 6,000 students. I need to make a decision about how many classes I want. This is going to be how many little ranges I want to break this into. For smaller data sets, you might go down to only 5 classes. This is quite a large data set, so I'm going to use a fairly big number here. I might target maybe 10, 15. You don't want to go much over 15, otherwise your graph or your table is going to be a little bit too many pieces. So I'm going to target 15, and I'm just going to use that number as a guideline to help me figure out how big each class is going to be. So I'm going to calculate the range of possible values divided by the number of classes. My range is just 6,417 here since I didn't have a min, but you could calculate the range separately as just the max number minus the min number. So I'm going to look at that range and I'm going to divide it by, in this case, 15. So I'm going to do my range number divided by this number of classes desired. So this gives me the desired width of each class. Now 427.8 is not a very nice number, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to round it to a nice clean value. This, I could do something like 420, but that's still going to give me kind of strange ranges of values. In this case, I'm just going to try going up to 500. This is a nice round number. I'll get really clean class limits. Having a larger class width than what I computed means that there's going to be fewer classes, but fewer than 15 is going to work for me. So I'm going to try this. There's no exact science to determining your class width. You just need to kind of figure out what's going to make a reasonable number of classes with your data. Okay, so based on these calculations, I'm going to write out each one of my classes. So my first lower class limit needs to be the min or something below that, right? If my min was like 2 or something like that, I might choose 0 as the lower class limit just to make that limit nice and clean. And then the class width represents not the difference between the lower class limit and the upper class limit, but actually the difference between one lower class limit and the next. So if my class width is 500, my next class or my next interval of values is going to start at 500 in this case. Rather than just typing 500, I'm going to use a formula to do this. So I'm going to say equals. I'm going to take my previous lower class limit, which in this case was just 0, and I'm going to add 500. Now, of course, 0 plus 500 is 500, but the reason I did this as a formula is that by adding my class width to the previous cell, I can now drag this down, and it will automatically fill in my table for me, so it's counting up by adding 500, adding 500, adding 500. And I just need to drag this down to make sure that I am going to contain all my data. I will delete some of these extra classes that I don't need in a minute. So those are the starting values or the lower class limits of each class. The upper class limits need to be an upper value that doesn't overlap with the next class. So I can't use 500 here because then if a school had exactly 500 students, that's going to get counted in both of these intervals. So I want to start just below that. In this case, I'll do 499. Enrollment is a whole number, so I don't need any decimals, but if I did have decimals, I could do something like 499.9 or 499.99. You just need to look at your data and see how do I make sure that there's not any gaps in between? So I couldn't do, for example, 490 because then if an enrollment was, say, 495, it wouldn't have anywhere to go. So I want to make sure that these ranges 0 to 499, 500 to the next one would be 999, etc. Don't have any gaps where the data isn't going to fall and don't overlap between their upper and lower limits. I'm going to use the same trick for my upper class limits. I'm going to take that initial value and add 500. That gets me to the upper class limit of the next class. And then I can drag that down to fill in all of these by counting 500 up all the way through the rows. Now, the maximum value I have in my data set is 6,417. So I'm going to look at these ranges and see where does that fall. That would be in this class here. And so I know I don't need any classes beyond that. So these extras are not necessary. I'm just going to delete them. And now we have these ranges that will group my data into, it looks like, how many do I have here? 13 different classes. So that should be good for me. I'm going to scooch over so I can see. The next thing I'm going to do is calculate the frequency. Now I've left a little gap in here for labels. The label section is going to have something like 0 to 499. The purpose of those labels is just for readability and also for if I create a histogram from this table. I'm going to leave this blank for right now. You can type these in manually, but I will show you later how to create those labels using an Excel function. But for this video, we're just going to do the frequency, meaning how many of these schools had an enrollment number, in this case, in between 0 and 499. We're going to use a function called COUNTIF to look at all these enrollment numbers and count how many of them are both greater than or equal to 0 and also less than or equal to 499. And we'll do that for each one of these classes. Here is the format for this function. So you might want to write this down in your notes. It's a little bit tricky to remember. The syntax is a little bit tricky. So the function is equals COUNTIFS. There is an equals COUNTIF without the S, but the ifs means that I have more than one criteria that I need to match, because I need this to be numbers greater than or equal to the lower bound and also less than or equal to the upper bound. So I have 2 conditions listed here. So in this function, I have 4 different inputs. The first input is the range of data values that I want to look at. So I called this data range here. When we'll see that Excel has a different name for it when we start typing in the function, but that's going to be my enrollment numbers. So I'll highlight that column for that input. Then I have a comma here. And then my next input to the function, I need to say, I want numbers that are greater than or equal to, and the way you write this in Excel is in quotation marks, greater than sign, equal sign. And then I wanted to use the lower bound for the interval that I'm looking at. Now, if I just typed in the number, I wouldn't need any of this extra stuff, but the ampersand takes my text condition and kind of sticks on the lower bound, which I'm going to use from the cells that I've already created. And then I'm going to do something similar. Again, the third condition is just the data range again, and then the less than or equal to ampersand, and then the upper bound. So let's see what this looks like in my example. So in my frequency box, I'm going to do equals COUNTIFS. So this is saying criteria range. So this is my data values. I'm going to highlight the whole enrollment column, and I can do that just by clicking on the letter above that column, comma. My first criteria is that we need these numbers to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to do quotation mark, greater than, equal to, and then end my quotation. And then I do an ampersand to stick on this value here, and I'm clicking on the 0 box. Again, you could just type in 0 here, and that would work, except that then we'd have to type this function in for every single one of these ranges. And this way, I'm going to be able to drag down my formula. Okay, so I'm going to put in a comma. That's my first condition. So I'm going to count all the enrollment numbers that are greater than or equal to 0. Then I'm going to count, again, all the enrollment numbers. I have to select that enrollment range again, comma. And now my condition is, quote, less than, equal to, end my quotes, an ampersand. And then I'm going to click that upper limit. That's the end of my function. So we have the data values, the greater than or equal to condition, data values again, the less than or equal to condition. And here we see that there are 4,242 schools whose enrollments are between 0 and 499. I don't need to type this formula in again for the next one. I'm just going to click that box and drag it down to the bottom. So here is our frequency table. We have each one of the classes or the ranges of values, and then the frequency. You'll see that the vast majority of the schools are smaller than 500 students. And we have a few little outliers here of larger schools. In fact, this last one, whichever school has more than 6,000 students, that maximum value is much, much bigger than any of the others. It would be interesting to look at which one that is and make sure it's not like a total value or something like that. In the next video, I'll look at how to write out these labels and also create a histogram from this information. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.